There we go. Thank you, and welcome everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here, to be back in Singapore, and especially for this event. It's such a great event to see so many coaches here that are committed to getting better every day, to really improving your skills in coaching. And that's really what I've spent my career doing, is working on coaching development and trying to help coaches to get better and to build coaching systems. I'd like to give a special thank you to the staff at CoachSG for all of the work that they did in preparing for this conference, and certainly as one of the foreign speakers that came in, the preparation and the organization and the hospitality has all been first class. So thank you to CoachSG. So the first time I came to Singapore was quite a long time ago. It was almost 30 years ago in 1989. And that really began a very strong connection between Singapore and Canada in coaching development, built on a strong belief that I think we've seen here demonstrated already this morning, a strong belief in the importance of coaching. At the time, 1989, Canada was bidding for the 1994 Commonwealth Games in Victoria. And when the bid committee came to Singapore, the Singapore Sport Council said that their #1 priority was coaching. And because Canada had already developed a coaching program, asked for Canada's help in establishing the National Coaching Accreditation Program. So that really shows a long history of a relationship between the two countries. And these are a couple of pictures from that visit in 1989. Some of you may recognize Robert Tan, who was the director of Singapore Sport Council at the time. And as for me, it proves that my hair has not always been this color. I was TD of the Coaching Association of Canada at the time and came over to teach a first group of coach developers to initiate the NCAP program. One of the, I think, common beliefs, and this is an indication from Canada about the importance of coaching, we're doing a similar thing to your 2030 vision, and the statement in the vision about coaching and the importance of coaching, I think, is really great to see, that coaches are the single most important influence on how athletes, families, schools, sponsor, and the public view sport. And these statements from Canada are very similar, that this was the result of a survey that was done by the Conference Board of Canada and surveyed a large number of individuals and organizations, over 1,600 individuals and over 500 organizations. And the overwhelming statement of those groups were that the top priority for the overall delivery system is coaches and instructors, and the top priority for the high performance system is coaches. So the work you're doing is extremely important. You're creating tremendous value for the athletes, for their parents, for the sports, and for society in general. And I think that's a strong belief that we share. What I'd like to do this morning in talking about developing coaching excellence and some of the global trends and good practice is really focus on 3 different themes. Really the big picture of coaching, building the coaching system, coaching education as the foundation for future success, and then who coaches the coaches. So it's really a macro view of coaching systems and how you fit in the system and what different systems are doing to try to improve coaching around the world. But also, I think most important, about the leadership role of the coach. And as Troy said, that is such a truism that the leadership of the coach is so essential to sport development. So your hashtag of coach as leader, I think, is a great choice. I think Singapore is addressing many of these issues, and hopefully it will be of value to look at some of the kinds of principles and frameworks that are being used internationally and some of the different programs that are out there. So, first of all, to start with building the coaching system, there's two aspects to that I'd like to cover. One is, what are the elements of a comprehensive coaching system? And second of all, enhancing the voice of the coach. Because again, I think it's very important that the coaches play a role at the system level and in shaping the system. And as you've seen here from Troy's presentation, you are very much a partner in that combined effort to build the best possible system for Singapore. So why is it important to have a systems approach? And I think whether you're thinking of your system at the club or school level or at a training center or at a national federation level, it really is around sustainable success depending on the different parts of the system all working towards the same goal. If we don't understand the system, if we don't spend some time thinking at a systems level, then we end up moving in cross directions, and that often is where the downfall of programs and organizations run into problems. And again, the coach's contributions are essential. No one knows the athletes and the variables needed to improve the athlete experience better than the coach. So looking at the different parts of the system, these are the elements that we define within the coaching system. Recruitment, so how do you recruit your coaches into your program? Coach education and development, what is the training and the professional development that you provide? Quality assurance is often neglected, but is an important part of any system and any program, so has to be really addressed. Deployment and employment of the coach, depending on the situation that they're in, but what are the roles and responsibilities of the coach? What are the working conditions of the coach? What are the job descriptions? And then coach recognition, and that's great to see the work that's being done by CoachSG in terms of coach recognition, because it's very often an area that is forgotten. The elements that underpin those different aspects of a coaching system are the research, strategy, and planning processes that you put in place within your organization, and the kinds of areas that you are able to provide coach support to enable the coaches to do their job, and also to put forward your coaches to be representatives in the decision making of the different organizations. And all of that is within a context that I think is essential, and that includes the ethical context, what the coaching ethics and child protection aspects are. There's some very unfortunate situations that raise their head on occasion, and most countries have experienced that. And if we're going to really protect the profession as well as protect the sport, and most importantly protect the athletes, we've got to deal with that aspects of having clear ethical guidelines and being able to remove coaches that are not able to work within those guidelines. And then finally, coach regulation and licensing, setting up the system that really is a step towards a profession of coaching, and having clarity around what are the expected standards of coaches and how do the coaches achieve those standards and how do they get licensed to practice to coach. So from the presentation this morning, there's a number of areas there that I think are really being addressed, but that's on a global level. I think if you also think of it within your own specific context, the question is, which of these areas are you doing well? Where are some of the gaps? And what are some of the things you can be doing to improve your overall coaching system? A tool I'd like to share with you that I think is quite interesting is what we call a depth chart. In many sports, you would have a depth chart of the athletes in a particular position, who are the top-ranked athletes in a certain position on your squad or within a particular team or organization. But very few organizations have really done that kind of analysis of their coaches. So this concept is to create a similar depth chart of coaching. This model is at a national association, national sport association level, but a similar concept would hold at a club or training center level. But in this case, the first part is to really identify who the coaches are that are in different parts of the system. So at the national team level or a regional training center or the top club coaches, and then to do the analysis of what is their career path and career objectives, what's their both academic training and certification, what's their experience, and really pull together who it is that's coaching in your sport. And this is using a red light, green light, yellow light process to identify where the strengths are and where the gaps are so that they stand out and you can look at what the areas are that you really need to address. So this really pulls together a number of the elements that are within that system diagram of looking at recruitment, of what areas do you need, looking at education, where do the different coaches need education, looking at deployment and employment, what are the status of those coaches in terms of the jobs they're doing, and also recognition. So I think it's quite a useful tool to consider in trying to pull together those aspects of your coaching system. Another idea around linking these different parts to the system together, and it all comes back to having that common vision and common goal so that all those parts are working together, is linking coach education to the needs of your club or your organization. So we've been able to do that to a significant degree by shifting to much more an outcomes-based education system where we clearly define what the coach must be able to do to meet the participants' needs. So the basis of the program isn't on the subject matter and the different pieces of content, but it is on the coaching skills that are needed, and that links much more closely to having a practical program for the coaches, but also a program that really the clubs or the employers can relate to, because those activities are exactly what they want the coaches to be able to do. So these are some of the examples at a more beginning level that the things that we would expect a coach to do in a club setting would be to plan a training day, analyze basic skills, demonstrate technical skills, coach a training center, coach at an entry-level race, communicate with parents, make ethical decisions, so have that ethical framework for what they do. So those all are the key skills that a beginning coach would want, and also that a club would be looking for, so it really links that employment and the coach education piece together. So these coaching outcomes become a tool for coach hiring, and that the coach learning is actually grounded in the reality of the typical club program. So I think as you consider some of the revisions to your education program, to think about some of these ways to link the education with the actual responsibilities of the coach and the needs of the clubs is, I think, a very progressive way forward. I think another foundation piece within the coaching system really is the scope of responsibilities of the coach. And this is pretty fundamental to building coaching as a profession and really understanding what it is that we expect of our coaches. So these core functional areas of coaching are what we've identified in the International Sport Coaching Framework as the key areas that we expect of coaches. So creating a vision and strategy based on the needs of the athlete or team and the context within which the team is working. So it's always got to be contextualized to what the reality is. Shaping the environment through the personnel and working practices within the group. Conducting practices and competition. This is really the core focus for athlete improvement, but the responsibilities of the coach goes well beyond that. And I think that's one of the challenges that I'm seeing in coaching, that sometimes the senior management or some of the international organizations are pinholing coaching as really being only the technical aspect, whereas what we're communicating here is really the leadership aspect of coaches with these different functional areas. Reading and reacting to the field, which includes making decisions under pressure, something that I think all coaches can relate to. Reflecting and learning. An effective coach never stops learning and thirsting for knowledge. I think any of the top coaches in the world that you talk to or have the opportunity to hear speak, they will talk about how they're always striving to learn and to improve what they're doing. So that's really an essential piece. And then building the relationships and the influence, not only with the athlete, but with the parents, the school or club, with other coaches. So that's all part of the responsibility. So these core areas really describe a very strong leadership for coaches as an essential part of the coaching system. I'd like to talk a little bit about the coach's role in decision making in the decisions of the organization. I think that's an area where within coaching generally we've struggled with in different times and places, where coaches sometimes aren't listened to and get very frustrated because they have such a depth of technical knowledge that should be part of the decision. But also in other cases, coaches aren't willing to step up and play that role of helping make sure that the right decisions are made or the most effective decisions are made. So we surveyed our coaches and asked, why should coaches be involved in decision making? And these were the main reasons that they came back with. So there's a number of them that relate to the best interest of the sports, that the coach is the closest link to the athlete, that the coach is the expert, and that to really build and buy into a shared vision, that's all very positive for the sport in making more effective decisions. But there's also aspects of this that are very much in the coach's interest, that many of the decisions that are made are going to directly affect the coach, and that there is a need to advocate for better working conditions and better circumstances for coaches. So I think this really is a message of encouragement to try to play a role and to take some part of your time in helping associations or the groups that you're working with to improve the quality of the decision making with your input. Some of the ideas about what could be done to improve that voice of the coach: to improve respect for the coach, the authority and support for coaches to make decisions within their scope of influence, and to empower the coaches, so to convey that message to organizations. To have licensing and professionalization, that I think when coaching is very loose and there aren't clear standards and guidelines, it's very hard to make the convincing argument that coaching is a more professional activity and that coaches should be integral to decision making. Security and protection of the coach, so the union, and I understand that's well along here in Singapore, which I think getting that collective voice is a very important part of this. Trying to encourage organizations to put coach representation on boards and committees so that they have the opportunity to be part of the discussion and the decisions. And encouraging coaches that coaches have got to step up to the plate to take on that role in decision making. So those are a few thoughts, first of all, on the elements of a comprehensive coaching system that includes that inclusion of the coach's voice. But I think it's also important to put that in context of the other systems around the coaching system, the athlete development system that coaches work in on a daily basis, but also managing up and looking at the organizational management system, that these have to be linked if we're going to have a real operating system working towards the same goal. So those are the two challenges that I present you in terms of building the coaching system. And now I'll move on to the second general theme, being coach education, and really thinking of that as the foundation for future success. Two challenges I'd like to discuss or touch on here are meeting the differing needs of coaches depending on who they are coaching. So I think we're seeing quite a widespread shift in the structure of coaching programs based very much on trying to provide the specific needs based on who you're coaching. And then preparing expert coaches, some of the developments that are happening internationally in terms of the expert level of performance. One of the core concepts of the International Sport Coaching Framework has been to try to look at that structure of, in the first case, the participants in sport, and looking at in many cases, the majority of participation-oriented athletes and performance-oriented athletes. So those are two quite different streams with quite different needs. And then within those two streams, there's subdivisions of coaching children, adolescents, or adults, or coaching emerging athletes, performance, developing athletes, and high-performance athletes. So I think in doing that kind of analysis, we start to recognize that there's many commonalities, but there's also many differences between these different, depending on who it is the coach is coaching. And so we've got to try to meet those needs within our coaching program. This is the coaching development model that the UK developed, called their 4x4 model, which is a reflection on that previous slide. So along the top are the different types of the types of athletes that are being coached. So coaching children, participation coaching, performance coaching, and high performance coaching. So if we consider those 4 population groups in those models, and then the x-axis along the left-hand side is the novice to expert continuum, the development of expert coaches for each of those different populations. What I think we have seen traditionally in coaching programs is really a diagonal line from the novice up to the high performance that implied that a level 1 coach was a novice coach working with children, and a level 5 coach was a high performance coach working with high performance athletes. And this is really conveying the message that that is faulty thinking, that we need expert coaches working with all of these population groups, and our coaching programs have got to reflect that. There's really very few coaches in the system that are in fact working at the high performance level and are the top national coaches, and we need everyone out there to move towards being an expert coach. And you don't have to change from being a children's coach or a youth coach to become a high performance coach in order to get more education and to become better and in fact to become an expert. So you should, in your coaching system, be able to become an expert and continue to work with whatever age group or population that you're coaching. So this is, I think, a pretty significant shift in the structure of coaching systems and coaching programs. But I think it conveys a very strong message that we value coaches through the whole coaching spectrum, that all of the coaches are doing an extremely important and essential job, a different job, but an extremely important job, and we can only be successful as a country if we develop expert coaches right through that spectrum. Now looking ahead at the expert level, and I think what we're seeing there is the demands of coaching, I think, have really grown in the last 15 or 20 years, and certainly since I was in Singapore in 1989. The number of competitions, there's many more different international games, Youth Olympic Games, so on and so on. There's many more sports-specific World Cups and major international. So just the volume of major games is really increasing dramatically, so we need more coaches, but also the sophistication of coaching and the interventions of sports science and the intensity of training and the need for recovery and the need for mental training. I mean, there's incredible demands on coaching. So many countries are upping the ante in terms of the kind of coach education that is provided to coaches in order to prepare them for those very demanding jobs at the expert level. We did a study of a number of these different programs. We looked at 5 different programs that are diploma programs to develop advanced coaches. So there's an advanced coaching diploma in Canada, a similar diploma in France. In Germany, the Trainer Academy has their diploma trainer. Netherlands has a program called the Top 5 Coach. Switzerland has a similar diploma. And these programs have been operating in some cases for some time. In Switzerland and Germany, they date back to the 70s. In other countries, they're more recent. The French program started in 2010. And the schedule of these programs are very much catering to coaches that are already in the workforce, so that they're really part of a formal education system, but it's within the context of professional development for coaches that are, in fact, coaching at quite a serious level. So the programs last from 10 months to 3 years and tend to be, in some cases, 1 week a month where the coaches would come in some cases, multiple long weekends, 3 or 4 day weekends. But the concept is very much building on your knowledge and experience as a coach, but really providing more advanced training and expertise for these people that aspire to really be expert coaches. So that process has been going on for some time, and now I think what we're seeing is engagement of higher education in coaching development. So I don't know if that's happening in Singapore, but I think it's happening enough around the world that the ICCE has just last year released standards for higher education sport coaching bachelor degrees. Part of this has come from coaches saying that they want to have an academic qualification because it's transferable to other walks of life far more than a sport-specific qualification. But also, I think it's a reflection within higher education of they becoming more flexible in meeting the needs of the clientele rather than being somewhat inflexible as we had experienced some years ago. I think the link with higher education speaks to moving towards a profession of coaching, because coaches or professions are based on a foundation of higher education. So a movement in this direction, I think, is important. And the message that we're conveying here, I think, is very much not that every coach is going to be expected to have a higher education degree, but that this should be available and that there should be encouragement for many of the leaders within the sports system and the coaching system to achieve this degree. There's many of the most successful coaches in the world that do not have a coaching degree. So I don't think we're looking at a pure profession where in the other professions the only way you can practice that profession is with that academic training. But in coaching, there's so many aspects to coaching. Many of the top coaches in the world don't have that qualification. So the message here isn't that there would be an expectation that everybody achieves degree status, but that it would be part of the system and something that coaches that wish to go in that direction to acquire that academic training, to develop that sports science foundation and coaching practice foundation, it would be available. Part of the standards that we have established is to insist really that such degrees to meet this standard include both knowledge and skills. Higher education, I think, has been very good at conveying knowledge, but not so much in developing skills. So there are coaching degrees or different degrees that really are sports science degrees or coaching studies, but that don't actually help you improve your skill as a coach. So part of the standard that we've established is that for one of these degrees to qualify, that it's essential that there's a strong coaching practical component to the degree. Another example that I'll provide, again in linking higher education with the sports system, is a new program at the University of British Columbia that is a graduate certificate in high performance coaching and technical leadership that ladders into a master's degree. And what I think is interesting here is that it shows an adaptability and flexibility within the academic community that just wasn't there in Canada not very long ago, but has really grown in recent years. And the same is true. There's other examples in Australia at the University of Queensland, in England at Leeds Beckett University, that would have very similar kind of situations. So this is primarily online to meet the needs of practicing coaches. Coaches just can't go back to school and be in a classroom all day, so the online portion of it, I think, is very effective. It integrates the highest certification qualification within the Canadian system, so that advanced diploma can be obtained through this program as a step towards a master's degree. And most interesting, I think, entrance is open to coaches with a strong coaching resume without an undergraduate degree. And that, I think, is a very, very strong change in the landscape in terms of higher education. So if a coach comes and they've got 10 or 15 years of coaching experience and can show the kinds of planning and documentation and monitoring of training that clearly they're a serious coach, they can get into this degree without having an undergraduate degree and go right in to this graduate certificate leading to a master's degree. So I think that's a great breakthrough and is really showing that link to higher education that we never had before. Now this is a Canadian example, but as I said, the similar circumstances are there at University of Queensland, at Leeds Beckett University, and this wasn't an overnight occurrence. It takes time to bring this change about, but I think thinking about how this may be able to be done in your environment would be quite interesting. I think how this came to play was really through executive MBAs. When universities really got seriously into that field of executive MBAs, it was catering, similar to what I just said, middle managers that had been, in that case, in a management role for 10 or 12 years, wanted to go back and get an academic qualification, didn't necessarily have an undergraduate degree or a commerce degree or something that would normally be a prerequisite. And so the universities opened the door to students, managers who didn't have an undergraduate degree. So we've been able to use that same argument in the case of coaching, and we've been successful in a number of situations. I think another program that's very interesting, and this is really at the elite level, the New Zealand Coach Educator or Coach Accelerator program, and it's a very direct program to develop New Zealand coaches to become capable of producing World Olympic and or Paralympic champions. And I think the success of New Zealand in high performance sport is really obvious. It's been incredibly successful with a population of only 4.5 million. At the last Olympics, they won 18 medals, 4 of them gold. I mean, on a per capita basis, it's really a phenomenal performance. And I think this is an illustration of how they have achieved that by really focusing on developing excellent coaches. And the area that they're emphasizing within this program is leadership. So coach as leader comes back again. So what they're trying to develop are coaches capable of producing top-level champions who are influential leaders and strategic thinkers, who are relentless learners who collaborate to achieve maximum performance gains, who are employed in significant leadership positions, who are sought after by national and international sporting organizations. So I think this is a very strong program, but also a very strong message about the importance of developing those leadership skills, regardless of who you're coaching. This is an elite example, but it's also true throughout the system. These are some of the personal attributes that they have as part of this program. I am positive under extreme pressure. I am driven by achieving results. I pay relentless attention to detail, resilience. Now, these are for elite coaches, and these are attributes that you see in elite coaches, and that's really what that program is striving to achieve. It would be a different list of personal attributes, as Troy said, for coaches working with different athlete populations. But I think defining both that scope of practice, but then these specific behaviors is part of the development process. Okay, so those are the two areas that I covered under coach education. Now I'd like to talk for a few minutes about who coaches the coaches. So creating the coach developer workforce of learning experts and supporting coaches in the field. So this concept of a coach developer is that it is a very specific role, and they are trained for that role, and they are there to develop, support, and challenge coaches to go on honing and improving their knowledge and skills. And I think what's important is that they aren't only subject matter experts, they aren't only concerned with delivering courses, but they have a key role to play in the support of coaching in the work that they're doing. Traditionally, I think in coach education, we've relied very strongly on subject matter experts, and that content is very important. But a coach developer goes beyond that to not only facilitate the course. They have the leadership role of the program. They assess coaches and observe them in the field and provide feedback and help them get better with their actual coaching. That can include mentoring. And then they have that program design and evaluation role. So it's quite a broad role, and I think quite a strong and important role to really make your coaching system work effectively. Within the ICCE, we're developing this concept and this qualifications, starting with the training of coach developers, so completing coursework in facilitation and coach observation and providing that support in the field. And then actually receiving the qualification once the coach submits a portfolio and really can show the evidence of their skills in those areas, and then moving on to become an expert coach developer. So in my experience, the different sport organizations should have a number of people. It can be quite a small number, but it depends on the needs and the size of the sport, but of the people that are really leading the coach education and supporting the coaches in the field. I think looking ahead to the role of coach developer, we had that initial role of really teaching courses and now reaching out more with mentoring and leading. But now an example from English football is they've now hired 18 youth coach developers to support the coaches in 92 clubs in England. The role is to provide guidance and support to coaches based on the needs identified by the clubs that will enhance coaching expertise and effectiveness in the elite player performance plan. And in looking at what they actually do, they teach the courses, so they provide the content and the principles of coaching, but more importantly, they support the clubs and help the coaches in their understanding and application of that learning. So in looking ahead to this role of coach developer and the kinds of support for coaches in the field, I think this is a very interesting model. Obviously on a very large scale when you look at English football, but can be scaled to the reality of different organizations. So those are some thoughts and examples from creating the coach-developer workforce and supporting coaches in the field. I'd like to just finish with a quote from Sue Campbell in terms of coaching, which she describes: coaching is an art and a science. It is about getting the best out of those around you through quality management and inspirational leadership. Again, focusing on that key role of the coach as leader. Thank you very much.